Okay, it's typical Ikea standard flat pack, pretty simple kit to assemble, but as always with Ikea assemblies, there are one or two things that can catch you out, and hopefully by watching this video I'll save you the time of finding out what those are. First thing you need to do is lay out the first two vertical struts. These do go two different ways. The bottom, which goes to the floor, which will have some threaded feet put in, is that end, and therefore the top is the end with the two threaded holes right near the top, whereas the other end obviously doesn't have that. So lay them out roughly like that, and then you need to get the top shelf, if you like, to approximately line up. And the first thing that can catch you out on these is the two screws are deceptive. One of the two screws is quite deceptive, so usually I would recommend using a drill driver to install screws or fixings on any flat pack furniture. But on this one, actually the top screw is so close there to the grill on the top of the shelf. If you get a drill driver in, the screw ends up going at an angle, and you risk ruining the thread that it's going into. So a screwdriver is just about okay, but you will catch your hand on that top shelf there. So if you really want to go the purest form, then you could get a ratchet to do that. But personally, I think a screwdriver is the most practical way of starting that out. And what you want to do is start that first one out and just do it up about halfway or 3/4 of the way. Leave it fairly slack for the other screws to go in, and that way it saves you a lot of time. Same with this one here. Just line it up and then just gently get it about halfway, 3/4 of the way in, so that it still moves quite freely. As you can see, that's fine. And then the other two you can use a drill driver for, and I found the best torque setting to use is on this drill driver, the DeWalt XR range, is torque number 4, so pretty light, honestly. And you also, I found, because the way these screws are made, they're a convex head rather than a concave head. They're not a countersunk type of screw, they're a pan head screw. Because of that, they've got a convex head, which means that the drill bit, even, and I used the screwdriver bit, even if you use a new one as I started with, does slip off if you're not really applying a decent amount of pressure to that head. So do bear that in mind. I'm putting a fair amount of pressure on that now, and that's perfect. So once those are secure, then you can go ahead and secure the top ones with the screwdriver. Okay, once that first one's fixed in with the first set of screws, then it's just a case of doing the same with the remaining shelves. Now, one thing to be careful of now, once you start putting the second one on, and this is almost guaranteed to catch you out, is there's two holes here on this side of the shelf but not on the other side. It's really important they all line up for reasons that will become apparent later. So do make sure you've got those two holes the same side as those two holes there, and equally for the remaining shelves do the same. Other than that, it's just a case of banging on the rest of the shelves in the same fashion as the first one. Once you've got all those shelves mounted on those two, it's simply a case of adding the remaining two vertical struts, and again that's the base there with the threaded inset for the adjustable foot, and the same again, see the base there and these two holes closer to the top, and it is simply a case of repeating what you've just done for these final two vertical struts. And in fact, it's a lot easier to flip the whole thing over to do that. And on this second side, I'm actually doing all of the ones by hand first, just to slightly speed it up, kind of batching the operations. And just being really careful to apply decent pressure on each one as I put it in, otherwise it does round the head off very quickly. Like that. That's better. Finally, just hand tightening those first screws. However, it's not over yet, so do watch to the end. There's a couple of other things you're going to want to know. Okay, so that's all the shelves tightened up, and what you don't want to do at this point is realise that you haven't got them all the same way around, and in fact hopefully that tip at the start saves you some time. So now it's assembled, we can do the final stages, which is adding a little back shelf, back to the shelf there, adding some wall retaining straps just there, even if you're not going to retain it on a wall, and adding the adjustable feet. So let's start with the adjustable feet. Flip it up, dead simple as you'd expect. I'm going to keep it on its back for now and get the rear back to the shelf in as well. So this does not go on the top shelf. It cannot go on the top shelf. It has to go on the either second, or you could always also put it on the third. But for symmetry, it looks it's in the IKEA catalogue on the second shelf here in the middle, which I think tends to be probably the best place to put it. And again, it's exactly the same. Just get these screws in. Obviously, you can use a drill driver for these because there's nothing obscuring. However, what you don't want to do is tighten it all the way up on these first two, because the other two screws will need a screwdriver and are quite fiddly. So you want to do the first set of screws up halfway to give you a little bit of movement in order to get the second set in. A little bit of resistance there, and I think it's because on some of these screws I have noticed is I think IKEA haven't had a bit of paint to get into the thread where the screw's meant to go, and that does mean on some of them, even if it's lined up correctly, it's not cross-threading, you just get a bit of resistance, but not on all of them. So you've got to be super aware as you're doing it to make sure that your screws are definitely set correctly and are not going to ruin the thread they're going into, cross-threading as it's known. If you do that, it's a bit of a pain to undo. Okay, if you do that, you'll need a tap and die set, which requires a lot of faffing about, and honestly it's probably not worth it for the cost of these things. It's probably time to get a new one if you do that, but I don't like waste, so personally I prefer to rescue things if possible. So this second set of screws can go in fully tight now, as we've got all of them in to some degree. But again, you notice I put this one in first. I did not tighten that up. I only tightened up the last one because all the others are seated, meaning that it can't go awry now. So now that last one's tightened up, go back to this one, tighten that up, and that's the two more awkward screws done up. And now that these are in halfway, they can go in all the way now. And we're nearly done. Again, talk of about 4, tightness of about 4. Okay, final thing to do on this is attach these straps. Now, even if you're not going to strap this to the wall, the purpose of these straps is when it's on its feet, if you've got a load of heavy items on it, if a young child or whatever comes along, tries to put it over, if it's not strapped to the wall, it will fall on and could potentially be a hazard. Whereas if you strap it to the wall, that hazard is eliminated or significantly reduced. This one is going to be moved around, so we're not going to strap it to the wall, but I will add the straps so that it can be. Now, you need to note that the screws that hold these straps on do have washers with them, and that's to allow you to move that backwards and forwards without the screw getting in the way too much. So it's just a case of screwing that on. I'm going to do this by hand because I don't want it too tight for the next people that will adjust it. And it's just, yeah, just as simple as that. And when you do want to add it to the wall, you simply loosen that off, push it out as far as you want it to be from the wall, tighten it up, mark on the wall where the holes need to go, and then you need to drill holes in the wall, attach suitable fixings. Most people have plasterboard walls. Do not put roll plugs into plasterboard walls because they will not hold. You need plasterboard fixings for plasterboard walls, which will hold very nicely. And that is it.